It's a mayoral forum featuring City Council Chairman Vincent Gray. He is a Democratic candidate for mayor of Washington. Incumbent Mayor Adrian Fenty is running for re-election. He is also a Democrat. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's an NBC4 reporter and a columnist for the current newspapers. Tom.
Very quickly, the Chief Financial Officer, Nnamdi, has cautioned both the mayor and the council that you've taken on a hospital, United Medical Center in Southeast. You've reduced the budget reserves from $1.5 billion down to $600 million when Wall Street thought the city wouldn't go to below $900 million in reserves. You've raised any number of fees, if not specifically taxes, in the city to balance the budget. I was told by financial people who were looking at the city said whoever wins the mayor's race has got to be much tougher in cutting the budget if the city's going to have a balanced budget in the coming year. And if you win, whoever wins, you'll be working on that budget almost immediately. Do you agree that the city is in a financial trouble if you don't do more to cut the budget rather than work around the edges as you've done the last couple of years? Mr. Gray, since you're challenging, would you cut the budget more than Mayor Fenty has?
Well, I think we're going to be faced with the very challenges that you cited, Tom. I have taken some steps already to try to rebuild the fund balance. The fund balance at the end of this fiscal period will be down to, will be down by almost $1 billion since this administration began. The first thing I did was, and it was a part of this budget, was get legislation approved along with my colleagues to say that every surplus dollar that we get in the future will go to rebuild the fund balance until we get to having the equivalent of 2 months of reserves, equivalent to 2 months of expenditures in the bank. And then secondly, so that we start to reduce our capital debt, taking a part of revenues that may be above what we projected and set them aside for what's called a pay-go fund. Pay-go is exactly that, and that is instead of borrowing every dollar that you want to invest in the capital improvements program of the city, that you take money that you got and spend it as you go along.
But the council has, in fact, you've changed part of the mayor's budgets, but you've gone along with substantial reduction over the last 4 years.
Well, let me just point out two things. First of all, the council has only 56 days within which to deal with this budget, which is a very short period of time to do the analysis, conduct the hearings, have the committee markups, and then have the council come together to make final decisions. Had we had more time, I think there's more work that could have been done. We voted on the 55th of the 56 days that were available to us. And secondly, a part of what the mayor presented to us and has for the last 2 years is overspending in the current fiscal year. This fund balance was being spent down by $255 million. $100 million of that was to cover overspending in the current fiscal year.
Is it my turn to respond to this question?
Well, it just seems that both the mayor, your administration, and the council have allowed the budget to almost spiral out of control in terms of expending, given the horrible economy we have.
Let me do two things. One, the city council has always had 2 months to review the budget since the beginning of the city council. So for a city council chairman now in 2010 to say it's not enough time is a new thing to the people of the District of Columbia. And the truth of the matter is you shouldn't be just figuring out budget issues for those 56 days. You should be figuring out budget issues during the entire year. My administration works on budget issues during the entire year. Let me put some facts on the table, Tom. During the 6 years I was on the city council, which was the time that Anthony Williams was the mayor, the budget of the District of Columbia during strong economic times grew anywhere between 5% and 12% per annum. There were literally years when, because we had excess revenue coming into the city, we had double-digit government growth. In the 4 years that I have been in office, talking about fiscal responsibility, our budgets have gone up 3%, 1%, and -1% and -3%. As we sit here today, my administration is spending less local taxpayer dollars than when we took over the government, but yet most people will say the service delivery has never been better. That is because we're managing the dollars better. We have laid off 2,500 people. All of those concerns and people who are mad at me and everybody who's saying, Fenty's hard on people, that's because we have made really tough decisions, and I know you're going to cut me off, Kojo, but I
wanted to get to a specific example.
I just want to counter what Tom said, that there have been a lot of tough decision making. They were not growing the budget, and obviously in an 80-year recession, you're going to dip into the rainy day funds.
We just wrapped up summer youth employment season. This year's program was already running over budget, but you proposed extending it for 7 days, an extension rejected by the council. What was your aim in doing so? How would you respond to those who say that your decision reflects poorly on your commitment to fiscal responsibility? Council members said that you put them in the unenviable position of either approving one more paycheck for youths or cutting housing for 135 to 250 homeless families this year.
We have a letter which I would like you to put on the WAMU website. It's from the federal government, from the Obama administration, which says that the dollars that we proposed to be used for summer youth funding were supposed to be used for that purpose, that they encouraged us to be used for that funding. I don't have the letter before me. We will get it to you immediately after the show. Please put it on your website. Now, those dollars don't actually need city council approval to be used for summer youth funding. The reason why we need the city council to vote was because they had artificially restricted the summer youth program to 6 weeks. When, for the entire time that we've had summer youth programs, they've been allowed to go for the entire summer. One more important fact. When we introduced the summer youth program budget to the city council for this year, we proposed it in a balanced budget at $43 million. The city council then cut it by $20 million, cut it $23 million. So I think when the city council voted, we were right about $25 million in spending, which actually, because of federal dollars, had us under the amount of spending at that particular time. So for the city council then to come and say, as they have, that we've overspent the budget when we originally proposed to have it at 43 and they cut the budget, is a little bit duplicitous.
You can join this conversation by calling 800-433-8850 or by going to our website, kojoshow.org, asking a question or making a comment there. Chairman Gray.
The mayor knew last summer what the budget was going to be for the summer youth employment program that began almost a year later. And that is an obligation of responsible, good leadership to live within the budget that is put before you. The reality is that budget was overspent $7 million. It was a $22 million budget that was at $29 million when it came before the Council of the District of Columbia. There was a request by the mayor to put $4.8 million more. The fact of the matter is that this program historically has been a 6-week program for virtually every year that it's been operated. It's been a 6-week program since its inception back in the late 70s and early 80s. And if you look at the history of this administration, the Summer Youth Employment Program was overspent by $30 million in 2008, overspent by $23 million in 2009, $7 million in 2010, and would have been $11 million had the council not stopped the action. So the reality is it has a history of overspending. It has a history of mismanagement. It has a history of not being managed well.
We've got to go to the telephones. Here is Priscilla in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, can you all put on your earphones, please? Priscilla, you are now on the air. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'm the clinical coordinator nurse at Joseph's House, which is in Adams Morgan in D.C., and it's a home for homeless men and women who are dying of AIDS. And so my question is actually to both candidates. Given the high incidence of HIV that's been reported and the change in leadership at the AIDS administration with Sharon Hayter's departure, I'd like the mayor to discuss what he has done since the reports came out about a year and a half ago to address the high incidence and what his future strategy is, and then also for Councilman Gray to address what his strategy would be if he were elected.
Mayor Fenty.
Well, of course, Hayter left about 2 months ago, and she did a fantastic job while here. We're glad to have her. She has deputies who are serving in the interim who have continued her focus, which was to do more to make sure people knew their status. And so that in knowing your status, you would act more responsibly around it. You know as well as anyone probably the 2 reports that were done, both on heterosexuals, same-sex couples, showing that too many people are having unprotected sex with multiple partners, not knowing their status, big cause of the incidence rates going up. The good news is that some of the reports that have come out recently do show that the infection rates are going down. The good news is that because of the money that we've put out in the community because of the aggressive strategies to get people tested, know their status, that not only are, I think, we having a better impact, we have the numbers more honestly reported, but that independent groups like Appleseed for the first time are looking at our HIV and AIDS administration and saying, finally, we're doing the right things. There's not going to be any immediate payoff in something as important as HIV and AIDS, but we're setting forth a real pattern of effort that is going to result in less incidents, less infections, and better treatment going forward.
Councilman Chairman Gray.
I think that there are 4 things that have to be focused on, and they're basic, and that is education, testing, counseling, and treatment. And this city clearly has not done an effective enough job in those areas. Our infection rate now is measured at 3%, and some in belief that it may be as high as 5%. Nationally, it's 1%. That is a pandemic. That isn't just an epidemic. And what has not been properly communicated is that the reasons why people are contracting the virus at this stage have widened. They have broadened. You know, we've got people, returning citizens coming out of our correctional system who have gotten infected within the correctional system, and they're bringing it back to the community as they resume relationships when they come back to the District of Columbia. IV drug use, transmission of the virus through the use of dirty needles is an increasing reason why the virus has been transmitted. One of the things that, we've got to, first of all, widen our education efforts, and we need to bring this more into our schools. We've talked a lot about bringing health services into our schools. We need to bring this issue broadly into our schools and teach our kids what the virus means and what it means to contract it. We also need to expand the number of agencies that do this work in the city. We've tended to focus on organizations that do specifically HIV/AIDS work.